Written in the stars, found in myself, the 12 signs that taught me love wasn't in the Zodiac, but in letting go, breaking apart, and choosing me. There was a time when I believed that the sky wrote my fate, that the planets, in their silent celestial order, shaped the rise and fall of my heart. I read horoscopes with devotion, folded my days around cosmic alignments, and told myself that if I loved hard enough under the right stars, everything would eventually align. But that illusion shattered on a cold December evening, when everything I'd built began to fall apart. My relationship with Chujino had not been extraordinary. It was safe, the kind of love that arrived quietly, with routine coffee dates and polite silences. I'd convinced myself this was enough, that real love didn't need storms. But beneath our carefully balanced dynamic was something already unraveling long before either of us admitted it. When the breakup came, it wasn't even loud. It was hollow, a slow detachment that left me stranded between guilt and relief. In the weeks that followed, I became a shell of myself. I stayed up late rereading text messages that now felt like fiction. I scrolled through horoscopes, trying to understand which alignment had betrayed me. I moved into my best friend Tanya's apartment and tried to stitch myself back together in a room filled with broken expectations. At the magazine where I worked, pressure mounted. Our most read column, written by the elusive Sophia, was missing. Deadlines loomed. My editor paced like a hawk, demanding a miracle. When Sophia didn't submit, I stepped not out of ambition, but desperation. I poured my heartbreak into the column, writing about the subtle death of love, the loneliness of staying too long, and the slow erosion of identity. I submitted it under Sophia's pseudonym, knowing full well what I had done. The article exploded, readers flooded in. Suddenly, people thought Sophia had returned, reborn, wiser and sharper than ever. The editor demanded a new series. She wanted 12s, each one a chronicle of dating a man from every zodiac sign. And so, reluctantly, a strange idea took root. 12 signs, 12 men, 1 year. It felt impossible. But something inside, perhaps the part that still craved meaning, decided to try. Maybe if I could understand men through their signs, I could find the pattern that made it all make sense. Maybe I could rewrite my own ending. And so it began. The Aries man entered like fire, uninvited and impossible to ignore. His energy was intoxicating. He lived in the moment, thrived on chaos, and moved as though the world would vanish tomorrow. With him, I felt reckless and alive. He taught me the thrill of unpredictability. But his flame burned too fast. The passion was real, but the patience was missing. He didn't stay long enough to learn my fears or hold my quiet. Then came these, slow, sensual, and patient. He cooked for me, fed me laughter, and made me feel safe again. With him, life slowed down. I wanted to linger in that warmth, to believe in the stability he promised. But he was rooted too deeply in his routines. He couldn't bend, not even for love. His comfort became confinement, and I slipped away. Gemini was a whirlwind. He spoke in metaphors, texted riddles, and had a smile that could melt any defense. Being with him was like dancing in a dream you couldn't quite interpret. He made me feel clever, special. But his attention was always divided. He was never all there. I realized painfully that charm could be a mask, and duality often came with distance. Cancer found me during a monsoon. He was soft-spoken, observant, and gentle. He held my grief like it was his own and reminded me that vulnerability was not weakness. He was the first to ask about my dreams instead of my past. But his empathy became dependency. He leaned too much, too soon. He needed someone to heal him, not just love him. I wasn't ready to be a savior. Leo lit up every room. Confidence radiated from him like a sunbeam. He adored me with lavish dates, grand compliments, and the drama of romance. With him I felt admired, celebrated, almost worshipped. But love to him was performance. When the applause faded, so did his attention. He wasn't interested in the parts of me that didn't shine. The Virgo entered like order after chaos, practical, composed, detail-oriented. He noticed when I changed shampoos, remembered the exact way I liked my coffee, and fixed the broken latch on my window. His care was quiet and methodical. For a while I felt seen, but eventually I also felt judged. My spontaneity irritated him, and my clutter unnerved him. He preferred structure over emotion. I preferred mess over masks. With each man I found a mirror. Some reflected the version of me I'd forgotten. Others showed what I'd outgrown. My articles grew more raw, more complex. What had begun as a gimmick transformed into something, a chronicle of self-discovery disguised as romantic research. Still, a part of me remained numb. Each date was a performance, each goodbye a rehearsal for the next. My heart, though learning, hadn't yet healed. Throughout it all, Jinno reappeared like a shadow in the corner of my vision. Occasionally, I'd see him at mutual events or hear his name from mutual friends. He never said anything. He didn't have to. The silence between us spoke louder than our last argument ever could. By the 6th Virgo, I was exhausted, not just from the dating, but from pretending to be okay. Love had stopped being about connection. It had become material. My identity was dissolving into ink and print deadlines. The lines between Namiru and Sophia blurred. Yet I continued. because if I stopped, I'd have to face the emptiness beneath the experiment. And so I braced myself for the second half of the Zodiac. Still searching, still asking questions the stars couldn't answer. The second half of the Zodiac began not with hope, but with fatigue. I had crossed the halfway mark, and yet I felt further away from clarity than when I'd first begun. The stars, once my guiding constellation, had become symbols I no longer fully trusted. But I pressed forward, driven not by curiosity anymore, but by momentum, and perhaps the quiet terror of what I'd face if I stopped. The man under the sign of Libra arrived like Ag, elegant, poised, and balanced in every way. He curated moments like an artist, creating beauty in everything we did. There was ease in his company, and something almost cinematic in the way he made the ordinary feel significant. Yet beneath his charm lay indecision. He feared conflict and avoided depth. Our connection hovered on thee, delicate, lovely, but fragile. I waited for a plunge that never came. With Scorpio, the atmosphere shifted. He was intensity incarnate, with eyes that seemed to see what I wasn't ready to reveal. He didn't flirt. He penetrated. Conversations with him were less like dialogue and more like excavation. I was drawn in by his mystery, seduced by the unspoken understanding that we both carried shadows. With him, I experienced a closeness so consuming it almost felt dangerous. But his secrets ran deep, and no matter how close I came, there was always a wall I couldn't climb. I left before I lost myself entirely in the depths of someone who had never fully surfaced. Then came a man who lived as though the world were a map, and love a detour. He swept me away in spontaneity and introduced me to places I'd never dared go alone. Our time together was filled with freedom road trips, laughter, and sleepless stargazing. But his heart belonged to the horizon. He thrived on the temporary. While I began to yearn for grounding, he was already looking for the next escape. Our goodbye wasn't sad. It was expected. He was never meant to stay. The Capricorn man arrived like winter, cold, precise, and focused. He was successful, driven, the kind of man who planned 5 years ahead and considered romance a detail, not a priority. He respected me, admired my ambition, and spoke of partnerships as if they were mergers. There was admiration but no vulnerability. With him, I felt like a trophy in a curated life. Everything was practical. There was no space for the messy, aching parts of me that still grieved, still dreamed. And so I walked away, unwilling to become another calculated asset. Aquarius brought a different kind of confusion. He was intellectually thrilling, endlessly curious, and always talking about the abstract. With him, I debated politics, philosophy, and love as a social construct. He lit up my mind, but my heart remained untouched. Emotions unsettled him. He observed pain the way a scientist might study a cell, fascinated but detached. I realized, with quiet resignation, that I could not build a life with someone who analyzed love instead of living it. Then finally, there was Pisces. Soft, imaginative, full of longing. He saw the world through symbols and signs, just like I once had. In him, I recognized an older version of myself, romantic to a fault, always on the edge of reality and reverie. We understood each other instinctively. There was a peaceful rhythm in our time together, but something in me had changed. I no longer wanted to live solely in dreams. I needed a balanced emotion tethered to something solid. I left him not because I didn't care, but because I had outgrown the girl who once believed love was only meant to be poetic. 12 men, 12 signs, 12 pieces of myself I had uncovered and reclaimed. When I looked back on the path I had taken, I realized the journey had never truly been about finding the perfect partner. It had been about disassembling the person I thought I had to be. The woman always searching for meaning in the sky and slowly becoming the woman who could face the ground beneath her feet. There had been moments of joy, yes. Also humiliation, anger, comfort, euphoria. But more than anything, there had been learning. The articles I wrote for each sign had gained a following. Sophia had become a symbol for something raw and real. Readers reached out, not just for advice, but to share their own stories. Somehow, in bearing my heart, I had given others permission to bear theirs. But as the 12th piece of the series went live, I felt strangely empty. The project was over, but the question stilled, what now? It was then that I finally allowed myself to confront the shadow that had followed me throughout this entire journey. Cha Jin-oh. His memory had lingered, not because he was extraordinary, but because we had never found closure. Our love had been paused, not ended. I thought I needed to erase him to move forward, but now I saw the truth more clearly. He had been part of my, not the ending, but a necessary chapter. When we crossed paths again, unexpectedly, there was no great confession, no thunderclap of realization, just quiet acknowledgement. We had both changed. We were no longer the same people who broke under the weight of expectation. The space between us was filled with everything we had once feared saying. Still, this was not a love story about reunion. I didn't run back to him. I didn't choose a man, not even from the 12. I chose myself. I chose mornings without anxiety, days filled with my own rhythm, and nights where I could fall asleep without overanalyzing every message and every silence. I returned to writing not for the magazine, but for me, for the joy of it, for the healing. I stopped asking the stars to deliver my fate and started creating it with my own two hands. Love would come again. I didn't doubt that. But now I understood that no sign, no man, and no horoscope could dictate its arrival. Because the real sign of love, the only one that mattered, was finally learning to love the woman I'd become.